Welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slowinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
You almost forgot.
Too enthusiastic, not enthusiastic enough.
Each week we talk games that it's like to make games and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and or making games. Show notes. Support us. Yeah.
By the things that we make. Actually,
can you send us some emails? Send us some questions. I don't have the selection that I would like. And that's not to.
Well, that's really so.
Wow.
It's great for whoever's reader mail we're doing today, isn't it? Fantastic.
I would like
email,
to think.
But we'd like better next time. That's basically what Alexander's saying.
This is
not how you treat people, Alexander. This is bad.
You see, hilariously, this is actually. This is great because it actually leads into a portion of our show later on. So yes, what are you playing, Mike?
Playing Thimbleweed Park.
Oh,
which is a graphic adventure game.
That's by a famous person too, isn't it?
Yeah, that old Ron Gilbert. I don't know why I said old. I meant old in the kind of colloquial, your good old mate Ron Gilbert. But now I say it out loud.
We're doing really good on this episode.
Rude. We're doing great though. This is, as I've said before, this is the level of professionalism people expect. It's great. It's really good. Very old school graphic adventure game. You know, for me, those were the Discworld games, Monkey Island, of course, Ron Gilbert made, Simon the Sorcerer. I think Discworld and Simon the Sorcerer are both very British graphic adventure games.
Yeah,
that perhaps haven't travelled.
Yeah, no. If you were alive during that time and you were in Lechmere or Caldor, you would see Monkey Island available on, like, there would be like a computer section, and Monkey Island was always there. Monkey Island and Number Munchers were always there. And if you got an extra treat, Oregon Trail was also there, and then of course Radio Shack had its Tandies. But yes, the my childhood experience of the Monkey Island games is fiddling with them in Lechmere.
So I like it. I think it does that thing, and I shared a quote from Mr. Gilbert a couple of days ago, which was basically, it's designed to match your memory of those games, not necessarily the unpleasant reality of them. So there's been a very obvious attempt to kind of make the puzzles less obtuse, streamline things, tutorialize it a little bit, bring you into it. That said, I have had to look at a walkthrough a couple of times. I've gotten stuck a few times. Mainly where I would take that more as a criticism of where it doesn't quite manage to achieve that goal. But 95% of the time, it's great. It's clean. You feel clever playing it. It's just really nice, and it's a Kickstarter, I believe, as well. So I'm sure the people who backed that Kickstarter, it's exactly the game they wanted. I'm having a brilliant time with it. I love it.
So now it looks, from the screenshots I've seen, it looks like it looks like the thing where the expectation for Broken Age was going to be that old school LucasArts adventure, and then they went in a very different direction. Whereas this is, we're gonna make a LucasArts adventure game, and it feels like that.
It feels like you've uncovered the game that never was released back in that era, right? Like, I'd say it rises above that in a few places. I'm not going to spoil things, but there's definitely some kind of visual effects and things they do. But yeah, generally it looks like a port. There's even an option to make the font in the game worse, so it better matches the historical games.
Nice.
Which I love. So there's a few things like that. It's very knowing. There's a protagonist in it who has just got a job working at LucasArts, or their non-trademark infringing version of LucasArts. Which is obviously the source of, because her family's massively disappointed that she's chosen to be a game designer and all this stuff. There's a lot of that humor. There are jokes about how rubbish Sierra graphic adventure games were, those kind of things. There's some good humor in there if you remember the kind of the period in games.
What did they wait, I want to hear what they're making fun of with the Sierra games. What did they say about the Sierra games?
So there's a there's a moment where you find and this is just a moment, a beat. There's a moment where you open a fridge and you find, several food items and things that are like very clearly going to be useful or ignorable red herrings. And then there's a broken tomato ketchup bottle, and you pick it up, and broken tomato ketchup bottle, shards of glass and tomato ketchup are added to your inventory in a slot. And just a little, and the character turns to the camera and says, "Now in a Sierra game, you'd be dead right now. But because we respect you as a player, we're going to carry on playing because I very carefully put that tomato ketchup into my inventory." And just that kind of thing, where it's mocking the kind of the reality that Sierra would often like elongate games by putting in deaths that were unfair or that you wouldn't have any information, you'd have to avoid or replay segments over and over again. There's another joke in there that's too good for me to ruin in a similar vein. So it's having those fun, but it's not just in jokes, actually. There's some very good story in there. I care about the characters. I've never been, if you've seen screenshots, you can see it's kind of referencing that kind of Twin Peaks X-Files stuff. I wasn't a massive fan of those things, but like there's enough in there for me story-wise. There's some great jokes. It's really good. I think the areas where for me it's weaker would be, I think some of the voice acting is not great. And so much so that it stands out in something that is otherwise brilliant and perfect in a lot of ways. Just a few of the line reads. Are
you sure that's not intentional because of the era of the game it's supposed to be? So it's supposed to give that King's Quest V like style voiceover.
I think given how carefully they have sidestepped the minefield of other things in the genre, it definitely jars. It's
not a bug, Mike. It's a feature.
And the other criticism, I guess I'd say as well, and this is probably more of a criticism of just, Ron Gilbert's design style, is he likes puzzle games that get bigger and bigger and bigger as they go on, like you're unlocking concentric circles of possibility space, as game designers would call it. For me, the game is at its strongest at around the midpoint in terms of the scale of the game. I would say it gets a bit too big with a few too many options, and that's where I started to get lost and started looking at walkthroughs because I knew I'd missed something very specific somewhere. And in two cases, actually, it was because I hadn't realized that a specific verb existed, which is interesting. So that would be my criticism, that maybe it goes a bit broad. But I suspect if you're kind of if unlike me, I played these graphic adventure games walkthrough in hand at the age of 10 and just, plowed through the content rather than actually playing them. I imagine if back then in the day if you were actually a player of these games who loved that kind of obstruction and information, I suspect you may actually criticize that for the first half it's too easy. There's an easy mode in it, which I've not played, but I've read up on a bit, where essentially all they do is a certain number of the items that obviously you get in any graphic adventure game. You get the items by, doing tasks or crossing boundaries. A certain number of those just automatically they just give you. So things that you would have to, it would be the equivalent of being given the rubber chicken with a pulley in it just off the bat. And then, being able to use that. And it's a nice way of doing graphic adventure game difficulty. I can see that working for players who are, even more rubbish at these games than I am. I like the depth of the harder mode though. But all in all, it's a great achievement. It's a very good demonstration of someone giving the audience exactly what they want.
See, I like the idea that you sat there with the book when you were a kid and just did the playthrough. Because I wanted
monster. The story and the characters, right. And I just walked through the walkthrough. And I'd always try them, and then about half an hour, and I get bored because I get stuck.
See, and I stand by the same thing that I stand by now, where it's like if I have to use a walkthrough or if I have to look it up on the internet, like I consider that a failure of design, not a failure.
You may not like this game, then you might hit a wall with this one. I definitely hit a couple.
It's why I didn't appreciate adventure games when I was a kid, because like
it might not be your genre, right?
Like I didn't, it's fine if the gnome asks me what their name is, and it's like, oh, it's Rumpelstiltskin. Well, maybe it's Rumpelstiltskin backwards, but no one's ever going to think it's Rumpelstiltskin backwards in a backwards alphabet. Thanks, Sierra. Thanks.
I would say that this game doesn't commit any crimes at that scale. But there's definitely stuff in there that is not obvious or requires you to have seen something very specific. There's also I just love that there's a joke. I'm collecting, this is not a spoiler because you see it right from the start of the game. There are 1 pixel bits of dust on the ground that you can click on and pick up, and then you've got a piece of dust, and then you can go and collect a second one, and then you've got 2 pieces of dust. And at a certain point in the game, it starts actually counting how many pieces of dust you've picked up in a gameplay context. And I don't know if it's now a countdown that I need to collect X amount more dust. And I know it's building to a joke. I know they're going to mock me for doing this, but I have collected about 40 pieces of dust in this game in these game environments. And I don't know the joke it's building towards, but I'm finding so much humor just in the anticipation of what that is going to be. So stuff like that. It's very knowing of what it is. It definitely is my sense of humor throughout. So yeah, it's great. I think I'm about 11 hours in. So there's a lot of content. So I would recommend it heartily.
So
how about you? What have you been playing?
I've been playing Persona 5.
Okay.
Whoo boy, that is a JRPG. It is the Jest of JRPG. And it's, if you go into it with that, if you've never played one before.
I haven't. Speak to me as if I've never played a Persona, so speak to me as an ignorant fool.
Well, as being a mutual ignorant fool.
You've never played one either?
No, because okay. I could never get over the hump of it taking 10 hours to get to the actual any type of game. And this one does a much better job of sprinkling. But I did get through the prologue, or the first section, last night. My current playtime is 11 hours and 48 minutes.
Is that repeating content? Is that you're like hitting some Dark Souls style difficulty, or is it that it's just like loads of cuts? Like what? I don't know anything about Persona. What's the content that's taking you 11 hours to get through in the prologue? It's
loads of cutscenes. It's right. a lot of character building. It's a lot of mechanics introduction. It's just
Assassin's Creed. It's JRPG Assassin's Creed.
I was just about to say it's gotten to that point where, remember, it wasn't Black Flag, or was it Black Flag? One of the Assassin's Creeds definitely hit the point where it almost became laughable how many hours in the tutorial went. It was something like it felt like it was 5 or 6 hours at some stage. Yeah. It was
Unity? Unity I remember being ridiculous. I don't think I got past the extended tutorial of the London one, which is crazy because I'm obviously a Londoner, so I would have thought that would be the one I'd love.
I think it was the one with the father for the first section. So was that 3?
That's Black Flag, yeah. Oh no, sorry, 3. No, you're
3.
Right. It's 3, isn't it? Yeah, it's the American Revolutionary one. Yeah,
but it's like that. It takes 10 hours.
But and Kenway was awesome though.
Black Flag is still my second favorite.
No, sorry, the dad, who's also Kenway, and the third one is an awesome character played by Adrian Hoff. I would love to play a game that was just him.
Maybe
the Evil Templar Assassin's Creed game would be fantastic.
Well, yeah, we got to get there eventually, right? But yeah, some people, for some folks, I guess they're getting through it in like 7 or 8 hours. But yeah, 11 hours, 40 something minutes. I'm finally past that. The world has now maybe opened up. I still haven't gotten to several things that there are menus for, but I don't know what they're for. So that gives you a sense that this thing is a slow burn. And my understanding is that a Persona game can take anywhere from 100 to 200 hours. So I understand why they're doing it, but it's it is weird that this game was, it was pretty much known that this was going to be the game that was going to be the transitional breakthrough game, because Persona 4 very much found a Western audience.
I remember Persona 5 being a big hype thing.
Yes.
I remember, seeing it at E3. Is there a density to the like you're saying, it's a slow burn. Are you enthralled by that? Or does it feel like you're crunching? Like
the only reason I really find the game interesting is because of the mature content, and the mature content is handled in a, there's definitely some folks would call it concerns. The way the mature content is handled, there are concerns.
Mature content, do you mean, is it violent, sexual?
So for example, the opening sequence is about abuse, and they call it sexual harassment, but it definitely alludes to more than that. So I'm not sure if in the localization they decided
they've cleaned it up a little bit.
They cleaned it up a little bit, because I can absolutely see that happening, because the things that they are implying have happened, or that the first sort of bad guy, what he's done, and then the words that they use very specifically from the localization. I'm not too sure those two things are connecting properly. So it is if you've and it's weird because 13 Reasons Why just came out on Netflix. Watch it, even though it's really intense, but it's good. But it's about how terrible how terrible high school is, and what's interesting here is that Persona 5 is also very much taking that approach of, at least in this first section, high school is terrible, the people in high school are terrible, and adults are terrible to children. And that adults are terrible to children theme seems to be going past this first section. But yeah, it's definitely not, a group of pals on an adventure to throw a ring into a thing or find
I always read it, like,
or...
when I saw stuff of it, I was always like, it was kind of in that Buffy vein. Like, that's what I'd always, but it sounds like it's a bit further than that. It's a bit more...
It's definitely, I mean, especially, I don't know where it goes from here, but this first section was super dark.
That's interesting.
And that's kind of the reason why, like, I stuck with it, is because I just wanted to see how it concluded. And
I'm not seeing a backlash to that content at all, or am I just being naive? Like, I'm not seeing people being bothered by that. Like, is it handling this stuff presumably quite well if people are kind of accepting of it?
I don't know. I think the people who are in, I think it's like trying to bring up South Park, where
right, okay,
you can't, like, South Park can do now what no one can question it. And basically, if you decide to make, a think piece or a YouTube video about South Park, it's like, shut up, it's South Park. Like, yeah,
you've been on the internet, right, Alexander?
But that's kind of why I think Persona is sort of getting a pass, is because I do know. I mean, the third one, they literally, well, people are going to argue this point, but no, they take a gun and they shoot themselves in the head. That's how they, like, enter the other realm. And so this one, they get a mask, and it's, they tear off the mask and it, like, actually tears off their flesh as well. So it's definitely there. But then, it is really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds really,
and then when you get the personas, the way you merge personas is actually you put the two personas into a guillotine, and then they get their heads chopped off, and then they turn into a different persona. It's intense. It is definitely. But this is why I'm kind of putting up with mechanics that I wouldn't on any other day. Like, it's doing interesting things, and even the parts where I'm like, oof, this is a chore. I'm kind
of
you have
very low tolerance for any nonsense from games. Like, that's something that I know about you, that you like things polished.
I like pacing. I really enjoy pacing. But yeah, that's why it's interesting to me that I've stuck through it, because I did have a battle the other night, which I just, simply I quit for the evening, because it was your typical JRPG. Let's toss this guy in there. He's gonna auto kill you. So you gotta grind some more to even go against him. And it's like, stop it. If I'm playing the game properly, and I'm doing and I'm progressing through your level, don't throw up some artificial barrier where now I have to dance around and do more of the same thing just because you couldn't get that incline proper. Yeah,
I'm buying you a copy of Thimbleweed. That's what's happening.
you just. Meanwhile, I've also been playing The Legend of Zelda, which is magical. That's a system seller right there. It's a good thing,
and has had to be, right?
Because it's the only game on it. Oh boy. It is really weird when you go to the eShop on the Switch and you look at what's available. Like, there's a couple really solid indie titles on, like Shovel Knight's on there.
There was one came out today that I forget the name of, but yeah, Beautiful Explosions, something like that.
I don't know, but like Shovel Knight's on there, and it's like, yes, Shovel Knight absolutely deserves to be on there. But
very
then
Nintendo friendly game as well. Yeah, very good fit. Yeah.
But then there's like really ancient Neo Geo stuff, and it's just like, why is this here? I don't understand. Why is this? I mean, the people who are purchasing this console and are part of your demographic weren't even born when these games originally came out. It's really weird. But Zelda's magical. Like, Zelda, it's the original Legend of Zelda with really nice graphics and, the 30 years of design concepts tossed in there. But when you really boil it down, it's the original Legend of Zelda. It has that first section, and then it's just go do and you can climb everything. I've been enjoying fishing, just throwing bombs into the water, so dynamite fishing. Why
do all your open world game experiences involve like gaming the system with explosives? I've noticed this. This is a thing. This is a theme.
Is it?
What was the thing in Fallout where you created an economy of?
That's right.
What was the Fallout? I remember you telling the Fallout story.
I created an entire economy around the trading system. So yeah, no, I was trying. I mean, but that's not gaming. That's just economics. Like, I made a trade federation.
Mr. John Nash would say that the two were the same thing, but that's probably beyond the scope of this podcast.
But yeah, the really brilliant thing about Zelda is that you look at a situation and you think, I wonder if I can do this, and yep, you totally can. Like, there's a right at the beginning, you get like this magnet thing, and basically I was just like, oh, how do I? There's a chest on top of a ledge, and I was just like, I have no idea how I'm gonna get up there. I wish I could just put this magnet thing behind it and then just slide it off the ledge, and I totally could do it. There were a couple other ways to solve that as well, but I think that's sort of the brilliance of this Zelda, and
that's when you have faith in your mechanics, is you can allow for multiple solutions, and that's it's kind of the holy grail.
Yeah, and they have faith. And it's justified, right? Because that thing is doing exceptionally
People
well.
are loving it. I've played the first kind of hour and then put it on the shelf and said, that's my traveling game. I'm going to Dubrovnik in a couple of weeks, so probably I take the Wii U, the Switch with me to play that.
I'm doing that too. I keep calling it the Wii U, and I don't know why I'm doing it.
I think it might be something to do with... I genuinely do think it might be because of the one game thing. Because it is so associated. It's just the Zelda machine for now. So I don't think it feels like it's a new console yet. It feels like a... I don't know. That's how I'm explaining it to myself. Is there's definitely... It feels like it's not there yet.
I definitely keep calling it the Wii. And it's a weird brain hack, and I don't know why I keep doing it.
It's called marketing. I think that's the main reason. You've just been sold that name very, very well for 10 years.
And now it's time for what's going on at the studio. And Mike,
hello.
You've been messing around with some stuff while we've been waiting to hear what happens with our prototype that we talked about that we've been pitching at DICE and GDC, and it's actually good because go ahead and talk a little bit about what you've been messing around with.
So yeah, I'm working with a coder, and we're playing with an idea. Just something that I've been wanting to do in my games for a while, but just never found the bandwidth to do. So we're just trying to make it. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a game yet, or if it's going to be a part of the final version of that prototype when we work out what we're going to do with that. But like, it's interesting, and it's fun as well, because I know it's a game. I know it's a game that you won't like. And that's interesting to me. I like that it's something that it would never be one of our mainline games. But I think there's something there that maybe is going to be a little experimental release at some point. But it's a lot of fun. I'm working with a coder as well, where it's the first game we've released, or we will release, or we may never release, where I've not written a line of code for it. Up to this point, we've worked with some great developers, but they've always been kind of coming in, halfway, 2/3 of the way through a project to kind of help me out, rather than kind of with this one where it's built from scratch by a real coder. So that's been fun as well, because I'm getting the tools to build content for it, and I'm assuming more of a design role, which is interesting to me, rather than just doing everything, which is cool. So now I'm having a good time with it. I think we've got something really interesting. I don't know if it's interesting to anyone but me yet, but I know it's interesting to me, and that's enough for now, and we'll see where it goes. It's one of those things that maybe it'll be its own thing, or maybe when we're talking about the new project, I'll just point to a feature in it and say, "Oh, that was the thing I was playing with." We talked about on the podcast.
As you've now called out, I'm not too much of a fan of where it's. Of the thing, but
of the thing.
This is sort of why we experiment, because there may be something in there, and it's interesting to me because with Earthshape, I know with Earthshape is actually 3 different things you were messing with, and
Earthshape was I made a planet generation prototype, a puzzle game prototype,
and a plant creation in the plant prototype,
and a plant growth prototype, and those 3 kind of we realized that they could kind of be mushed together in an interesting way, and that's where Earthshape came from.
Yeah,
and
so
then working with Google on how to do that in VR and all that stuff, but
actually kind of supportive of this, and one of the things we don't really talk about that much, and for numerous reasons, because again, very much like many of the things we talk about on this show, it's just not sexy. But
everything we talk about on the show is sexy. We make it sexy because we're that good at presenting it, you see.
Oh, I wish I was. But it's R&D. It's research and development. And there should be spent on research and development within a company. Now, because we're a development studio and we're small, we don't really have that luxury, and we can't just, have a skunk works like over there just doing its thing, like trying to figure out the next big whatever. But yeah, there is absolutely a valid business argument that a significant portion of free cash flow should be spent on development of in this case new systems, because it's not really tech, exploring different options. This is all...
I'd say it was a design R&D, to be honest. I don't think we're creating anything that's, massively going to change the face of game development, but I think we've got some ideas design-wise which feel fresh to me.
Yeah. But I mean, if we had, a bunch of coders and we didn't have anything to do with them, like, we could start work on the Bithell engine, available...
That'd be profoundly stupid of us.
Available in 2024.
Can I share that story?
Go right ahead.
So one thing we did the other day, because Alexander's not worked in kind of bigger team environments yet. One thing we did just as a exercise for the two of us was we watched the Horizon end credits together, and we would pause it and we'd talk about what each of those job roles was. And I think that was kind of useful to you, right, Alexander? Like, there was just to understand what those, because you knew how games were made, but you didn't necessarily know kind of how those jobs were split. And it was interesting to see how an open world game did it.
And it's also immensely helpful from a budgeting standpoint, because
Sure.
I know how much those people cost, because I can look that up. There's various ways I can do that. So it helps me gauge how much does a team, if we move on to larger projects, how much does that team cost? Because each person in a different department has a different sort of scale.
So we got to the tools programmers and and Alexander was saying, why are there 3 pages of tools programmers? And I said, well, because Guerrilla have their own engine, and it's they've been finessing that, to my knowledge, since the first Killzone, and it's now being used by Kojima for his new project. It's a great engine, and it's an engine that they've been building up over the years, and for obvious reasons, for a long time it was a very good first-person shooter engine, and now they've managed to kind of extend it into more of an open world. I don't know how much of that meant just rewriting it, or how much of it was just there. But we had a chat about that, and we talked about how kind of game studios have their own engines, and that historically it was very popular to work in your own proprietary engines. When I was at my first job, I worked at a studio that had its own engine, which meant that you couldn't go online to find an answer to a question. You had to call the tech team within the company, and often the answer would be, we've never put that in because no one's asked for it before, give us a month. Which was interesting, and there are definitely strengths to doing that, but obviously it's incredibly expensive. And engines nowadays are very generic, which I mean is in a good way, that you can use Unity or Unreal or any of the other engines to make lots of different kinds of games. Arguably, the argument for anyone but the biggest studios in the world, which are working on one system, to have their own engine, it's getting harder. And yeah, Alexander said to me, well, maybe if we do well, we can look into a Bithell engine. And I said, sure, if we ever have 30 million that you want to throw away, we'll start the process. A year, by the way, like it's crazy the amount you have to spend to build an engine, and then to support an engine, and presumably you don't want to just use that engine, you want to license it off to people and make money. So then you've got
that's what you have to do to make money off of an engine. You gotta. And
I've seen studios try and do that and fail many times. Unity and Unreal. I mean, Unreal obviously have built a company around that over 20 years, 30 years. Unity's interesting because that came out of, I believe, kind of a Mac architecture tool, basically, or something like that. It was a very niche visualization platform that just had a go at making like an amateurish kind of, or designed for amateurs game engine that just slowly grew up, and by about Unity 3, it was actually a serious contender as an engine, and it's obviously gone from strength to strength since then. So it's doable, but you kind of have to have a time machine and a big bag of money, and we do okay, but we have yet to work out time travel. So I think it's a flawed plan, but it was yeah. Anyway, that was a fun tangent.
Well, but it's good for me to know, and I'm gonna end this segment by writing down this note. 30 million and Mike will let us make engine. Cool.
An R&D on time machine.
An R&D in time machines.
1, 2, 3. I want to thank you for reading the mail again. Thank you for reading the mail again.
hi, Mike and Alexander. But
sorry, just to be clear, Alexander, this is the disappointing email, right?
This is the disappointing email. Hi, Mike and Alexander, but mostly Mike. You've mentioned on the show on a few occasions the Auteur myth, and I saw that you promoted Extra Credits video as well. That was good. What are some other options you think are available for promotion? KCP.
That's a good question. And actually, I think Alexander will have some good answers as well on this one. So the Extra Credits video was just pointing out that, you know, we have this mythology that Warren Spector made Deus Ex, and actually hundreds of people made Deus Ex. And with the indie space, we've continued that mythology. They use the example of Rami and JW, and missed out actually the point that Rami and JW, even they are not responsible for everything. They have an enormous number of collaborators who they work with as well, so it gets even bigger. I think I pointed out kind of some of the rough team sizes making our games, and that, you know, people associate the games we make with me. And it was a very good Extra Credits episode, and they kind of pointed out the reasons, and the main reason is PR. It's much easier for me to communicate my name and be out there.
Does Extra Credits always have that jerk reporter thing where it's like, oh, the scoop? The reporter gets
with the white little thing in his cap and everything. That's their reporter image, yeah.
No, but they always have it say, "I've got a scoop." It's the same sort of mocking that I've seen you do. But it's
game developers. We respect and love the press. 6 months before our game comes out each time.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. It's a year. No, I don't mean that either. I feel terrible. No, but I think I don't think journalists are responsible for that image. I think we've all worked very hard to do it, and it's been a good way of presenting ourselves. So it is a valid way of promoting the games. The team that we work with have often kind of, I've had moments of conscience where I've been like, is this okay that I'm out there talking about this stuff? And people have turned to me and said, well, yeah, because then we'll sell more copies and I have a job. Which is weird, but it's an interesting conversation to have with your team. In terms of other options, I think there's a few. One is obviously the studio, so to build up a studio name. If you think about Devolver Digital is a great example. It's a publisher, but it could in theory be done with a developer as well. The general public, I think, would be hard pressed to name anyone who works at Devolver, wouldn't they? They'd have a hard time because Devolver have actively worked against putting anyone in front of a camera. And that means that if you're a game developer, you know the people from Devolver, you know who runs it and all of this stuff. But they have they have the kind of the fictional Fork Parker, they have a bunch of different stuff. It kind of, they actively avoid that cult of personality stuff, and it works well for them by creating an incredibly strong brand around a studio. I think that's the trick, though. I think people, as a developer, you have to realize that a story needs to be told about you, about the games you make. So you have to give a hack journalist with a scoop, you have to give that journalist the narrative that they can turn into a story, right? Like, so if you're not going to put the story of a person in front of them, you have to come up with something that's equally compelling. What do you reckon, Alexander?
So yeah, it's, you know, you pretty much nailed it with the studio needs to have a story or a narrative as well. And the interesting thing about the Extra Credits video is that it focused on journalists, and journalists are the ones that create the narrative. And it's like, no, I disagree with that. Yeah, let's calm down here for a second, because
no one's forcing Rami to do an interview.
And now that we have,
God knows nobody's forcing Rami.
And you know, but now we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have all of these ways where audiences communicate directly with content creators in various forms. So that's also creating this narrative of the one person that exists.
That's true. And it has a dark side as well, right? Like, if I go on Twitter and irritate everyone, that has a real effect on, well, a lot of people at this point.
You know, and we have plenty of recent examples in the video game industry of this occurring. So, like, we won't bring that up, but we can use an outside of video games example as Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart is a really solid example of the brand was around her. And by having the brand around her, it caused problems when she went off to jail, because, Martha's not running the company anymore. It's like, it's a multinational conglomerate. Martha wasn't running everything.
She wasn't writing the paychecks, was she?
Yeah, like no matter how delusional you may be to think that like one person can run all of that, it's not the case. It's too big. There are plenty of like lieutenants involved that had to step up. And I think a really good example of transitioning from, actually this is a fantastic example of transitioning from two people to a brand or to a company, and I'm pretty sure I've brought up this before, is BioWare. BioWare is a great example of, it was the two doctors. It was the two doctors. The two doctors did everything. No, totally not true. Mm-hmm. But they were the ones. Every interview was with the two doctors. Every type of promotional aspect of the game was the two doctors. And then the two doctors said, "We're out." And the great thing is, the lieutenants who were built up inside of the company were the ones who then took over. And BioWare, yes, there's sort of the there's sort of the aspect where those folks were now brought to the forefront. But I think BioWare now is more recognized as and I'm sure a lot as a company, and I'm sure a lot of people still think the two doctors are in charge. Which is also a possibility in there.
But that crucially doesn't matter, right? Because it comes back to the story's the thing. And it doesn't matter if people think the doctors are there, frankly.
Yeah.
If they keep being interested in the work being made.
And the product. So that's the other aspect here too, is that you could disappear.
Me? I could I'm being threatened. Okay, if I do disappear, could someone please send this podcast to the authorities? That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
But yeah, if there's a situation where you could remove the auteur, or actually
remove the auteur. This is not a conversation I'm enjoying.
I've got a great example. There's a furniture company here in New England. Called Jordan's Furniture, and for many
Jordan died, or
no, there were two folks that were in all the commercials, and then they got bought out by some conglomerate or something along those lines, and they kept one of those guys to keep doing the commercials, even though I don't even think he's a shareholder anymore, has anything to do with the company. But it's just the audience
consistency, right?
Yeah,
narrative.
There's just this consistency of so for example, I keep talking about getting rid of you, but there's a version where it's you've got nothing to do with anything anymore, but we just trot you up on stage to say some things.
Again, the word trot. None of this is flattering. This is. I'm gonna, in many years, in about. Yeah, in 15 years, I'll be sat listening to this podcast crying. That was the moment. That was the moment the idea entered Alexander's mind to oust me. Yeah, I'm glad everyone was here to hear it.
But when the conversation comes up of what are some of the other options that are available for promotion, it's the studio. It's focusing on the narrative of the studio rather than the narrative of one person, because one person can be as we've seen time and time again, problematic, and can become a lightning rod. Now, it can also be great, because that one person can go from getting bought out by a massive publisher and then starting something new, and then they get plenty of press attention and everything like that because it had nothing to do with the company. It has everything to do with the person. Now, there's the flip side of it, and I like to use the movie The Insider, starring Al Pacino and that guy from Les Mis, the one in Gladiator 2. I can't remember his name right. Russell Crowe. Anyway, there's a really great scene.
I thought for a moment there that you meant Gladiator 2, as in a sequel to Gladiator.
Like Gladiator as well.
I know there was a planned one where he was a time traveler, but again, we've gone off piece. Carry on.
Is that true? I don't know.
That's absolutely true. Look it up, yeah.
No.
It's a whole thing. It's like him fighting like he fights in every war for the rest of time or something. And it was just going to be a weird Russell Crowe vanity project. Seriously, Google it. It's fascinating. I think there's even a script out there.
It sounds like the American Horror Story of like Gladiator, where it
was like the is it X-Men Origins Wolverine, where you see like him through all of the different wars. It was basically going to be that for a whole film with Russell Crowe.
Or Forrest Gump. Gary Sinise. I completely lost my train of thought here.
You were talking about The Insider starring Al Pacino,
the
Insider, that guy from The Gladiator.
Right. And so one of my favorite lines in that movie is Al Pacino works at 60 Minutes, which if you're from outside of the US, it's a really well-known news magazine show.
How long is it?
60 Minutes.
Oh, cool.
Oh, about 40-something minutes with commercials.
Okay.
But one of the more important things that he says in that movie, well, no, there's a lot of important things, but one of the things that sticks with me is he says, I'm blah, blah, blah from 60 Minutes. If you remove 60 Minutes from my name, who am I anymore? And I think that's certainly something you can struggle with if you are, part of a studio and you don't have your own standalone identity. And that's certainly something that, the YouTube era has taught us, is that, okay, yeah, you might be a lightning rod because you are one person, but if you're not one person and you have your own personal brand, you may be incredibly talented. You may completely be the thing that makes something happen. And
it's weird. So when you think about the directors, like of the big kind of AAA franchise, the fact that so many of those people are just not household names, despite having worked on some of the biggest blockbusters in our industry, super weird. But that's because obviously the publishers want to keep people invested in the big brands rather than associating with a specific director who could go somewhere else.
And that's the dangerous part, right? Like if we start treating the game directors or creative directors or whatever term various publishers use for these folks, if they started promoting them in that way, they're incredibly dangerous because you'd have sort of a Hollywood model.
Yeah, agents start to step in, and we're seeing agents stepping into the industry anyway, but that would become even more prevalent, and it would get very, very weird very fast.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com. Please send emails. Send us brilliant emails about like the Auteur myth and such. You can also send us questions through the YouTube comments of this show or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slewinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Dowden. We'll be back next week. I'm getting very close to moving to London, I just realized. We should probably talk about that on the show. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Lola.